My name is Anaya. Today I am rich, powerful, and respected. But before I got here, I had to learn one essential lesson. Justice is like a free buffet. Everyone talks about it, but only the privileged get access to it. Let me tell you how I discovered this great truth. I was 17, and unlike other students wasting their time making terrible TikToks, I had a plan for the future. I wanted to study finance and become a multimillionaire before I turned 30. I had the grades, the discipline, and most importantly, an ego big enough to believe that nothing could stand in my way. A naivete. It all started on a Monday morning when the principal of my high school, a balding old man desperately trying to hide his expanding forehead with 3 sad strands of hair, called me into his office. "Miss Anaya, we have a problem." I almost replied, "Your haircut, maybe?" But I held back. "Some money has gone missing from the administration safe. And wouldn't you know it, we found an envelope full of cash in your locker." I raised an eyebrow. He said it as if I were a seasoned criminal hiding my loot in a rusty old locker. "Oh, really?" I replied. "And you think that if I had actually stolen that money, I'd be dumb enough to leave it where anyone could find it?" "Guilty people sometimes make mistakes," he said, wearing a smug smile. I smiled too. Not because I found it funny, but because I had just realized something crucial. They weren't here to hear the truth. And who found the money in my locker? The head supervisor. Of course, the same supervisor who always looked at me sideways because, according to him, I acted too confident. Final verdict, permanent expulsion. No trial, no investigation, no right to a lawyer. If I had known, maybe I would have hired a TV lawyer like in Suits to make things more dramatic. That evening, things were even worse at home. My mother cried as if I had committed murder. My father sat in silence, probably wondering how he had managed to raise such a sloppy criminal. I was alone against the world. But what they didn't know was that Anaya never forgets. After that public humiliation, I could have spent my nights crying in bed while watching Korean dramas. But no, I took a job, then 2, then 3. Cleaning, deliveries, online sales. You name it, I did it. I saved every penny like an old grandmother hoarding her money. While my former classmates partied and posted ridiculous selfies with animal filters, I devoured books on finance and investing. And then one day, I discovered the stock market. From that moment, everything changed. I learned to play with money the way a conductor plays with his orchestra. Bit by bit, my earnings grew, and because a good revenge should never be half-served, I also took courses in cybersecurity. Not to do anything illegal, of course, just to understand how things could be done. By the time I was 25, I was a multimillionaire. But guess what? I still had a debt to settle. Where justice doesn't exist, I became my own law. Remember the principal of my old high school? He probably didn't remember me. He was too busy scamming other students, organizing useless meetings, and desperately trying, in vain, to hide his receding hairline. But I hadn't forgotten him. Years had passed. I had built my financial empire, and my life looked like a dream even Hollywood wouldn't dare to write. A penthouse with a panoramic view, well-stocked bank accounts, first-class travel, the whole package. But there was still a little shadow on the canvas. I hadn't settled my score with the past yet. So I did what any rational and mature woman would do in my situation. I took my revenge. And not just any revenge. Not some basic cliché confrontation where I storm into his office yelling, "You ruined my life," with dramatic background music. No. I wanted a masterpiece. A revenge slow-cooked, simmered to perfection, and served with elegance. Step 1. Finding the weak spot. I started by doing what any normal person in 2025 would do, stalking his LinkedIn profile. First observation. He had been promoted to regional director of private schools. So now, in addition to ruining the lives of innocent teenagers in one school, he had the power to ruin even more. Lovely. Second observation. His lifestyle was a bit too luxurious for a school director. Expensive watches, 5-star hotels, brand new cars, all on an educator's salary? Either he had won the lottery and forgotten to mention it, or something was shady. Guess what? It was the second option. Step 2. The trap. You know the beauty of the internet? You can find everything. And thanks to my contacts, and some unconventional investigative techniques I'll avoid detailing here, I discovered he was embezzling school funds. He had set up a well-oiled system. Fake invoices for renovation work, ghost employees, suspicious transactions. The kind of scam you'd see in crime TV shows, but executed by a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. What he didn't know was that I had become a master of the money game. And his little game? I was about to destroy it. I built a rock-solid case. Irrefutable evidence, shady bank statements, anonymous testimonies from former employees who were tired of turning a blind eye. And then, I dropped the bomb. I sent everything to multiple journalists, an anti-corruption NGO, and, cherry on top, directly to his employer. Step 3. Public humiliation. Because it's more fun that way. A massive scandal erupted, headlines everywhere, government investigation, frozen accounts. I sipped my coffee as I read the morning news. School director accused of embezzlement, investigation underway. It was the most beautiful thing I had read in years. A month later, a video went viral. The principal, sweating, trying to explain to a panel of reporters that he was the victim of a conspiracy. I nearly spit out my tea. A conspiracy? Dude, if only you knew how much of a real conspiracy this was. The best part? His wife left him, taking half of his assets, and his own son posted a TikTok saying, "My dad is a fraud. I'm ashamed." Ah, the internet. What a magical place. Step 4. The final blow. You might be wondering, but Anaya, why stop there? Why not take it even further? Good question. That's why I bought the building of my former high school. Yes, you read that right. With a small portion of my stock market earnings, I purchased the building and turned it into an entrepreneurship training center. A place where students learn how to build their own businesses, manage their finances, and most importantly, never let anyone walk over them. On the day of the grand opening, I invited former students, and guess who happened to drive past the building? The ex-principal. We locked eyes through his car's tinted window. I raised my coffee cup in a little salute. He looked away. And me? I smiled, because in this world there are two types of people: those who suffer injustice and cry in a corner, and those who turn it into fuel for their rise. I think he finally understood which category I belonged to.
I am Armand, a ship captain for over 10 years. My life has always been one of adventure, raging oceans, mysterious islands, forgotten treasures. I have faced storms, sailed to unknown lands, and battled dangers at every turn. Yet despite all these experiences, I have never known true love. I have had companions, admirers, but nothing that made my heart race like the ocean, vast and untamable. But one morning everything changed. I received a letter, sealed with a strange red emblem. The envelope bore an M, a sign I did not recognize. Curious, I opened it, and here is what I read. Dear Captain, I need your help. A legendary treasure hidden for centuries awaits discovery. It lies on the island of Crystallis, beyond the merciless seas. Only a bold man can accompany me on this quest. Meet me at the port. I am waiting for you. This message, as brief as it was, ignited a burning curiosity within me. I had never heard of the island of Crystallis, yet something inside me told me that this adventure would be different from all the others. Without hesitation, I set sail. When I arrived at the port, a ship was preparing to depart. That's when I saw her for the first time. A mysterious woman with jet black hair, dressed in a dark leather coat. Her blue eyes pierced my soul before she even spoke a word. Her name was Melina. She was there for this quest, and everything about her exuded determination. But there was also something unreachable about her, as if she carried a heavy secret on her shoulders. I'm ready to leave whenever you are, she said simply. I nodded, and without another word, we set sail together. The first days of the journey were intense. We faced giant waves and a howling wind that seemed determined to swallow us whole. But Melina never wavered. She remained calm, always ready to handle any situation with a composure I deeply admired. We shared night watches, and over time, I began to know her, to understand that she was not just an adventurer like me, but that something deeper drove her actions. One night, as we stood alone on the deck, the sky was clear, and a thin mist hovered over the water. Melina turned to me, her eyes glowing in the moonlight. You know, Captain, this treasure hunt is not just an adventure for me. It's more than a mere desire for wealth. I looked at her intrigued. What do you mean? She smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm searching for something that cannot be bought. A truth, a reason to hope. Her words left an unsettling impression on me. Who was she really, this woman wrapped in mystery? I didn't know, but I was beginning to feel drawn to her more than I wanted to admit. Days passed, and the island of Crystallis grew closer. But then, a storm erupted, more violent than any I had ever encountered. The sky darkened in an instant, and the sea raged like a furious beast. The ship rocked, the sails snapped, and the horizon became almost invisible under the pounding rain. I ran to the deck to ensure everything was under control, but the storm overwhelmed us. A jagged rock emerged suddenly, and the impact was brutal. The ship split in two, and I was thrown into the freezing water. Just as I thought I would drown, a hand reached out to me. It was Melina. She pulled me from the water, pushing me toward the shore. At that moment, I understood that this woman was not just a traveling companion. She was my salvation. She was all that mattered. When we emerged on the island, drenched and exhausted, I looked at her differently. Her face bore the marks of fatigue, but her eyes still burned with the same intensity. And there, on that deserted island, our hearts finally revealed themselves to one another. "You saved me," I said, the words escaping my lips before I could control them. "And you showed me that I wasn't alone," she replied. "I always knew you were close to me, even when you thought this was just another adventure." We had found each other in the midst of chaos, and it was within that chaos that we realized the treasure, the ancient artifact we sought, was not the true prize we were destined for. What we were truly searching for was each other, in all our imperfect beauty, in all our truth. The next day, as we explored the island, we finally found what we had been seeking, a hidden cave beneath enormous rocks, where an ancient artifact, a precious stone, a relic from another time, lay untouched. But to me, the true treasure was in Melina's hands, in her gaze, in the way she made me feel alive like never before. We spent several days on the island, lost in time, forgetting the sea and everything that had brought us here. I was no longer just a ship captain or an adventurer. I was simply a man, with a woman I loved more than anything. Our conversations, our laughter, our moments of silence were more valuable than any riches we could ever imagine. When we finally set sail again, hand in hand, with the repaired ship, the sea stretched before us, calm and serene. The adventure, the treasure hunt was over. But I knew our true journey had only just begun. I smile when I think back on that time. People often say that love comes when you least expect it, but for me it arrived with the wind, the water, and the waves.
My name is Maya, and I'm 17 years old. In my high school, everyone knows me. I'm the perfect girl, the one who has it all. Good grades, popular friends, a huge house with a pool, and a father who drives a Porsche. But what no one knows is that I feel trapped in a golden cage, suffocated by expectations I never chose. And then, he arrived. Zane. Zane is everything my parents would hate. He always lingers in the back of the classroom, his face half hidden under a black hoodie, with a mocking smile that seems to say he doesn't care about anything. He never does his homework, skips classes, and there are all kinds of rumors about him. They say he smokes behind the gym, steals from stores, and hangs out with shady people. The first time he spoke to me was after a math class. I had stayed behind to talk to the teacher, and when I walked out, I saw him leaning against the wall. "Hey, princess, don't you ever worry about getting your fancy shoes dirty in a place like this?" I rolled my eyes and wanted to ignore him. But he kept going. His words were provocative, but his gaze fascinated me. He looked at me as if I were a mystery to be solved, not just a rich girl with a perfect life. In the following days, he started showing up everywhere I went. Sometimes he would throw teasing remarks at me. Other times, he would ignore me completely. And instead of staying away from him like any sensible girl would, I was drawn to him, like a moth to a flame. We truly talked for the first time one night after a party where I was bored to death. I had stepped outside for some air, and I found him smoking in a dark corner. "Want to try?" he asked, holding out his cigarette. "No thanks." "Then why are you here, Maya? This kind of party is your thing, isn't it?" I didn't know what to say. Why was I standing there talking to him, being interested in him, when everything told me I should stay away? But the more I got to know him, the more I realized he wasn't just what people said about him. Yes, he had a complicated life. Yes, he made mistakes, but he also had a sensitivity that no one saw. With him, I could be myself, away from my parents' and friends' expectations. Zane was a bad boy, and I was the perfect girl. But for the first time in my life, I felt alive. But things started to get complicated. Zane had this gift of making me forget the world around me. When we were together, everything felt simple. We talked for hours about our dreams, about what we hated, and everything we wanted to escape from. He often told me I was too good for him, but I could see in his eyes that he loved breaking down my walls, and I loved that he did. One night, he took me to a place he called his refuge. It was an old abandoned hangar by a lake. The walls were covered in graffiti, and the air smelled of damp wood. "This is where I come when I need silence," he said as he lit a candle he had in his bag. It wasn't much, but in that moment it felt magical. "You know, Maya, sometimes I wonder what it's like to have a life like yours," he murmured, staring at the lake. "And I wonder what it's like to live without always trying to please others," I replied. He looked at me with that half-mocking smile, but this time, there was something else in his eyes. Sadness, maybe. It was beautiful, until it wasn't anymore. One afternoon, as I was waiting for him near the basketball court where he usually hung out, a black car pulled up. Two men stepped out, and their presence immediately made me uneasy. They spoke to Zane, but it wasn't a friendly conversation. Their voices were low, but I could feel the tension in their gestures. When they left, I confronted him. Who were those guys, and why did they look like they were threatening you? "It's nothing, Maya. You don't need to know. Zane, you can't just ignore this. If you're in trouble, I want to help." He laughed, but it was a joyless laugh. "Help me? You? Maya, you live in a world of glitter. You have no idea what my life is like." His words hurt, but I couldn't give up. Not after everything we had shared. The more I discovered his world, the more I realized that Zane wasn't just surviving in a complicated life. He was trapped in it. He worked for those men, delivering packages he never wanted to describe to me. He said he had no choice, that it was this or something far worse. One night I followed him. My heart was pounding, but I had to know. I saw him enter a warehouse. There were men waiting for him. I stayed hidden behind a container, but what I saw chilled me to the bone. Bags, weapons, and threatening looks. When he saw me afterward, he knew that I knew. "Why are you here, Maya?" he asked, his eyes filled with the kind of anger he had never shown me before. "Because I love you, and because you're better than this." He laughed, but this time it was almost a sob. "You don't understand anything. You don't know what it's like to have no choice." Things had taken a turn. Me, the perfect girl, was now caught in a world where nothing made sense. Except Zane. But like any story where someone tries to escape their own golden world, complications appear out of nowhere. And one of them was about to change everything. Zane's sister Luna was a storm. She had those fiery eyes and a breathtaking temperament, but it wasn't her beauty that intrigued me, it was her fixation on her brother. Luna wasn't just the protective sister, she was obsessed. "You know, Maya, sometimes I wonder why he never listens to me. I feel like I have to control everything in this family," she told me one day, shrugging as she barged into the living room while Zane and I were talking. I looked at her, half amused, half worried. "You know, Luna, he's an adult. He can make his own decisions. You're not his mother." She smiled, a sinister glint in her eyes. "Oh, but Maya, I'm not his mother, I'm his sister. And sister, they know everything." I barely had time to process what she had just said before Zane walked in, and Luna disappeared as quickly as she had arrived. In the days that followed, things got even stranger. I started receiving anonymous messages on my phone. If you want Sudden, you're going to have to fight for him. Or, did you forget about Luna? She saw everything. She heard everything. At first, I thought they were just jokes, but when I ran into Luna one night after school, she gave me a smile that sent chills down my spine. Zane isn't like other guys, Maya. You really think he's going to save you, huh? Well, he has a pretty messed up way of saving people. She gave me a look full of hidden meanings before turning her back and vanishing into the crowd. I knew everything was turning into a dangerous game, but I was too caught up in the passion to see where it would actually lead us. Zane and I were electric, but with Luna around, things were turning explosive. One night, after escaping a party that got a little too intense with Zane's friends, he took me to an empty park. You know, I think Luna is trying to ruin everything between us, I said, trying to make a joke to lighten the mood. She's a little possessive, isn't she? Zane gave me a look, half amused, half exhausted. Not just a little possessive, Maya, completely. She thinks she owns me, but I'm far from being the obedient little dog she's trying to train. I laughed despite the situation. That's a hell of a family dynamic. Have you ever told her you'd rather be a wildcat? Zane shook his head, a smirk on his lips. Trust me, if I told her that, she'd lock me in a cage and that would be the end of it. But humor didn't change anything. Luna kept playing her game. She started showing up wherever Zane and I were, even when he hadn't planned to see her. One time, she came to the same party, blending into the crowd, and when Zane arrived, she walked up to him like I wasn't even there. You know, I could hurt you a lot more than you think, Zane, she whispered in his ear. Then she turned to me with a smug look. And you, Maya, do you really think you can save him? This time, it wasn't a game anymore. I was determined to take control of the situation, but I knew Luna wouldn't leave me alone. If I wanted to keep Zane, I had to be smarter, and maybe a little bolder. The story was spiraling, full of passion, danger, and nervous laughter to keep from crying, because no matter how much we laughed together, beneath the surface, a tragedy was brewing. Zane was caught in a war between his family and me, and Luna had no intention of letting me win. The game was on, and there were no rules.
I'm Adam, and I have a twin brother, Elias. That means we've shared everything since birth. Birthdays, clothes, gifts. Because our parents always thought it was a good idea to give us the same things to avoid jealousy. Even trouble. When we were kids, if one of us broke something, it was always the twins who did it. I've always found this logic questionable, but Elias accepted this shared fate with zen-like calm. He's always been the reasonable one, the one who thinks before acting, who weighs the pros and cons. Me? I act first and think later, if I have time. The problem is that for the first time in our lives, we couldn't share. Not this time, because we had fallen in love with the same girl. Nora was the kind of woman who could make you believe in God if you didn't already. Beautiful, smart, funny, and with that thing that makes you addicted, a mix of sweetness and unpredictability. One second, she could be talking about French literature, and the next, she'd challenge you to a barefoot race in the rain. Of course, Elias and I noticed her at the same time. But while I spent 3 weeks trying to come up with lame excuses to talk to her, hey, did you know bananas are berries? Yes, that was a real attempt. Elias just went ahead and was himself. And guess what? It worked. One day, while we were hanging out at our usual cafe, he dropped this information like it was no big deal. I have a date with Nora tonight. I nearly choked on my coffee. Excuse me? A date. You know, when two people like each other and decide to spend time together. No, but how? He shrugged, looking relaxed. I asked her. I stared at my brother like he had just announced he'd learned how to fly. This wasn't fair. He hadn't even tried. He hadn't studied the best approach. He hadn't rewritten 3 versions of a message before accidentally sending the worst one. He had just asked. And she said yes? Obviously. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. At that moment, I knew I couldn't let this happen. That night, while he was reading one of his philosophical books, another one of those truth, love, and tofu kind of things, I tried a gamble. Elias, you know the strongest couples are the ones that are tested, right? He looked up at me suspicious. I'm going to regret asking, but go on. Just imagine, if Nora didn't love you for who you really are. What if she was only attracted to your looks, your appearance, and not your spiritual essence? He raised an eyebrow. Where are you going with this? I put on my most serious face, the one I used to convince my mom that no, I did not eat the last piece of cake. A test, a simple test. We swap places for one date. If she realizes I'm not you, then it proves she truly loves you. But if she doesn't notice any difference, well, I let the sentence hang in the air. He looked at me with that expression he always has when he's debating whether to call me an idiot or follow me into my nonsense. This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous is not being 100% sure. Do you really want to spend your life with someone who might confuse us? Imagine, you marry her, and in the middle of the night she kisses me instead of you. Nightmare, right? His face went pale. Got him. Fine. Okay, but just 1 hour. 1 hour. That was all I needed. The next evening, I put on his favorite shirt, the one that made him look even more perfect than usual, wore his cologne, and practiced copying his voice. He had a particular way of speaking, always calm, with thoughtful pauses between words. I, on the other hand, tend to speak too fast and too loud. Just act natural, Elias advised before I left. I wanted to tell him that natural and me don't go together. I met Nora at a small Italian restaurant. She was wearing a blue dress that looked so good on her I almost forgot my own name. Hey Elias, she said, smiling. Hey Nora, I replied, trying to match his calm tone. She didn't notice anything. First test, passed. Dinner went great. We talked about everything and nothing. She laughed at my jokes, which never usually happened. And when she placed her hand on mine, my brain exploded. I was starting to believe everything was perfect. That's when things started to go wrong. Tell me, Elias, why aren't you as serious as usual tonight? I nearly choked on my fork. Huh? I don't know. Usually you always have a very thoughtful opinion on everything. Tonight you're more light, spontaneous. Crap. She was noticing differences. I had to recover. I put on my best thoughtful face. Elias spends 70% of his time looking like this. Sometimes you just have to go with the flow, I said in a deep voice. She smiled, satisfied. Second test, passed. When we left the restaurant, she slipped her hand into mine. My heart raced. I had a great time tonight, Elias. I opened my mouth to say something smart, something Elias would say. But then she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me on the cheek. I forgot how to breathe. See you tomorrow? She asked. I nodded, unable to speak. See you tomorrow. Except tomorrow it wouldn't be me, it would be Elias, and that was a problem. Sitting across from Nora at that cafe, I had a realization. A terrible gut-punching realization. I was completely and utterly screwed. Because she wasn't looking at me like she thought I was Elias. She was looking at me. The real me. And I knew it. I also knew that I was about 5 seconds away from making the worst decision of my life. I'm so glad we could meet, she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. I forced a smile, my brain doing backflips trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. Yeah, of course, I replied. Always happy to. Grab coffee. Coffee's good. What are you even saying, idiot? Nora tilted her head, studying me with that curious knowing look that made my stomach twist. You know, I really liked you the other night, she said, tapping her fingers against the cup. I froze. Yeah? Yeah, you were different, more fun, more yourself. Ouch. That one stung. Because she was right. I had been more myself that night. And the worst part, she had liked me more for it. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Elias, can I ask you something? I nodded, unable to do anything else. Do you ever feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not? Ha! If only she knew. I swallowed hard, forcing out a laugh. Pfft. Me? No way. Totally authentic. 100% real. Never faked anything in my life. She gave me a small smile, but her eyes held something deeper. You can tell me the truth, you know. Oh no. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to feel that something was off. And if I didn't say something now, this would only get worse. I had to end it. Right here, right now. Nora, listen, Hey, lovebirds. I turned around so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. It was Elias, and he looked pissed. Elias marched up to the table, arms crossed. His signature, Adam, what the hell have you done this time, looked plastered on his face. Adam. Nora's eyes widened. Wait. Adam? I winced. Surprise? There was a long, painful silence, then... Are you kidding me? Yeah. She was not happy. Look, I can explain. Oh, I cannot wait to hear this explanation, she snapped, crossing her arms. I swallowed. I was about to die. Right here in this cafe. I could already see the headline. Man gets murdered by furious woman. Twin brother watches in silent judgment. I turned to Elias for backup. Bro, help me out here? Help you out? Oh no, you're on your own, buddy. Yeah, I deserved that. I turned back to Nora, trying to think of the best way to say, sorry I stole your date and made you fall for the wrong twin. Okay, listen. This started as a stupid test to see if you could tell us apart. That's it. She blinked. A test? Yes, just a tiny harmless experiment, no bad intentions at all. She glared at me. And then what? You just forgot to tell me the truth? I was going to. When? At our wedding? Oof. That was fair. I rubbed the back of my neck, avoiding her fiery gaze. I messed up. Oh, you think? She stood up, shaking her head. I can't believe this. I really thought... She trailed off, looking at me like I had just kicked a puppy, and that hurt more than the yelling. I opened my mouth to say something, but she was already grabbing her bag. Don't bother, she muttered. And with that, she walked out. Elias and I sat in silence for a long time after that. Finally, he sighed. So, how does it feel to ruin everything? Horrible. Thanks for asking. He shook his head. I should be furious at you. You should be. But honestly, I think you just saved me a lot of heartbreak. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned back, watching the door Nora had walked through. If she couldn't tell us apart, then she never really loved me to begin with. She just loved the idea of me. That was a good point. I sighed, slumping in my chair. So, what now? He smirked. Well, you could always try being honest next time. That sounds hard. Yeah, well, so is getting slapped. Touché. I looked out the window, watching Nora disappear down the street. Lesson learned. Never, ever swap places with your twin for a girl, especially when she might have been the one.
My name is Dalida, and not long ago I was just an orphan. My existence was nothing but a succession of bleak days where winter seemed never ending. But all of that changed one day, thanks to a stroke of luck I could never have imagined. If someone had told me my life would take such a turn, I would have laughed. But today, I stand here telling you my story. I was just a lost girl, caught in the chaos of life until Richard, a businessman who seemed almost otherworldly, opened a door for me, one I had never dared to dream of crossing. I still remember that day when I took the old bus back to the orphanage. The rain pounded against the bus roof, and I sat there silently, my dreams of escape floating far beyond my reach. Richard boarded the bus that day, his gaze intense yet kind. He spoke to me with a gentleness that surprised me. He didn't try to comfort me with grand words, he simply listened. After what felt like an almost surreal conversation, he invited me to his home. Come with me, Dalida. My wife and children would love to have you. Me? A simple orphan in the home of a billionaire? At that moment, I had no idea what lay ahead, but my heart pounded and I didn't hesitate. Arriving at his mansion, which seemed almost magical, I discovered a world I had only seen in movies. Golden corridors, shimmering mirrors, and soft lights revealing an almost unreal beauty. But inside, a silent battle was already brewing between Victoria, Richard's daughter, and me. Victoria? She didn't seem pleased with my presence. Every smile I offered was met with an icy glare as if I were nothing more than an intruder. And every time her eyes met Maxime's, her brother, I could feel the tension in the air. Maxime, he was different. He had that piercing gaze, that presence that unsettled me in ways I didn't yet understand. Maxime was the son of Richard's friend, and he didn't quite fit into this gilded world either. But from the moment our eyes met, something passed between us. Something neither of us could ignore. One evening, as we all gathered in the grand living room, he approached me, a sincere smile on his lips. "Dalida, I wanted to talk to you," he said. And as he took my hand, my heart leapt in my chest. He told me he had fallen for me, that he had felt something from the very beginning, something inexplicable. But just as he finished his confession, Victoria appeared, her eyes filled with fury. "Maxime, have you lost your mind? She's an orphan, just a girl who has nothing to do with us." Her words echoed through the room like thunder, and a wave of anxiety washed over me. What had I done to deserve such contempt? It felt like the walls were closing in, the air growing heavier, and I was ready to collapse. So I left, wandering alone through the mansion's corridors, searching for a place to be alone. My thoughts swirled in my head. I didn't want this rivalry. I didn't want to be caught in a battle between two worlds. I found myself in the grand salon, where soft music played in the background. I sank into a chair by the fireplace, took a deep breath, and closed my eyes. Then, a song began to play softly in the air, a familiar, soothing melody. It was Ne me quitte pas by Jacques Brel.
Je me quitte pas, faut pas pleurer. Tu sais que je te jure, je ferai des histoires à n'en plus finir, rien que pour qu'on rie tous les jours. Ne me quitte pas, je te ferai des mots doux, des saisons. On ira danser dans la neige ou faire un tour sur les monts. Ne me quitte pas, on dessine des rêves dans le ciel. Je te décroche, fais chaque étoile pour en faire des merveilles. Ne me quitte pas, on dessine des rêves dans le ciel.
That song, with its words filled with pain and tenderness, held a comforting power. It was as if the music wrapped around me like a cocoon. I listened to every note, every lyric, as if they were healing an invisible wound. In that moment, the song spoke to me more than any words ever could. The lyrics seemed to reach straight to my heart, as if the music itself was telling me not to give up, to keep going despite everything. That song gave me a moment of peace, a moment of clarity, and there, in the silence, with only the piano accompanying my thoughts, I made a decision. No matter what others thought of me, no matter Victoria's jealousy, no matter the secrets and lies hiding within this mansion, I was going to forge my own path. I was not just an orphan, just a nameless girl. I was Dalida, and I had far more to offer than anyone could imagine. But that wasn't all. As Maxime, worried, entered the room to find me, he took my hand once more, his eyes filled with sincerity. Dalida, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. And in that moment, I turned to him and, without hesitation, said, Maxime, I don't need your protection, but I'm not going to run away either. The story of my life was far from written, but one thing was clear: I would never again let fear dictate my actions. If I had known my life was about to turn into a dramatic series filled with schemes and manipulations, I would have taken notes. But no, naive as I was, I thought Victoria would simply hate me in silence until she got tired of it. Wrong. One evening, as I walked through one of the long hallways of the mansion, because yes, in a house like this, we don't talk about rooms but personal domains, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill down my spine. Mom, she has to go. I know, sweetheart, and trust me, I already have a plan. You see, Victoria's mother, Madame van der Shield, had the elegance of a queen, the smile of an angel, and the soul of a great white shark. I held my breath. They were going to take me down. The next morning, everything seemed normal, too normal. Even Victoria had a strange smile, and believe me, a friendly smile from her was more suspicious than a spider winking at you. In the late afternoon, while Richard and Maxime were away, an alarm went off. Everyone rushed to Richard's office, and there, a pile of banknotes was sitting on his desk with my name scribbled on an envelope. Madame van der Shield, with a falsely shocked expression, placed a hand on her heart. Oh my God! Dalida, tell me you didn't steal this money. Victoria, her eyes shining with triumph, added, Dad welcomed you into our home, gave you everything, and this is how you betray us? I almost choked. Me? A thief? The butler, the staff, everyone was staring at me with wide eyes. I could feel the judgment thick in the air. Madame van der Shield knew Richard trusted me, so she struck where it would hurt the most. I wanted to speak, to scream that it was a setup, but Victoria was already crying in her mother's arms as if I had stolen her very soul. And then Richard arrived. He listened to the accusations in silence, his eyes narrowing slightly. But I saw it. He had doubts. He walked up to me and murmured, Tell me the truth, Dalida. I'm innocent. Silence. Long, heavy. Then he pulled out his phone and typed something. 2 minutes later, the security camera footage from the office was displayed on the mansion's giant screen. And there, the perfect image of Victoria and her mother placing the money themselves. Madame van der Shield went pale. Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then Richard took a deep breath and the boss's wrath. I can't believe this. Richard's voice shook the walls. He turned to his wife, furious. You too? You were part of this madness too? Darling, listen, it was just to protect our family. Madame van der Shield tried, but Richard's glare could have melted a glacier. You want to protect our family? Then here's what we're going to do. Victoria, starting today, you're going to a rehabilitation center. And you... He turned to his wife, his gaze icy. If you want to stay in this house, you will never try to manipulate anyone again. Silence. Madame van der Shield said nothing. Victoria let out a horrified cry, but Richard didn't waver. 2 days later, a driver came to pick her up and dropped her off at an ultra-strict center where even iPads were forbidden. And me? I was free. The end or the beginning. After this whole ordeal, I decided to take some distance. Too many emotions, too much drama. I went to live outside the mansion for a while just to breathe. But one evening, As I was returning home, Maxime was there. Did you really think you could disappear like that? I just needed some peace. He smiled, that amused expression I loved so much on his face. Then he stepped closer and pulled out a ring. So, Miss Drama and Suspense, how about marrying me? And just like that, my orphan story turned into a modern fairy tale. But I stay on my guard. You never know. Maybe Victoria will be back.